Good morning. We are live at the MSS West Midlands and we are back with our panelists to start the day off. We're going to be looking at the top post holder of the future. And to do this, we are very, very pleased to be joined by Dee Deu, Chief Information Security Officer at Vitor Jesus, Lecturer in Cybersecurity and Privacy, Aston University, and Ellie Hurst, Head of Marcom and Media at Advent IM. It's a great pleasure to have you on. How are you all doing?
Excellent.
Great, thank you, Helen.
Well, it's great to have you here, and it's great to be here in person. Love the Wesleyan Building, very iconic.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
And I'm loving being in your neck of the woods, because your neck of the woods is a hotbed for talent. And I feel that many times people go to London or they go to another place, and I think this is an ideal location. But we're looking at the trifecta of managed service providers, managed security service providers, and end customers. How can they work more effectively together? And in a way, and by the way, Paul says hello, Steve says he went to Ashton, so hello. Anderson says good morning. I'm just giving you a flavor of the chat.
Morning.
Morning. And we are pinning our hopes that the answer to this relationship improvement could be on the leader of tomorrow, the top post holder. Now, I haven't given them a name. Some people call them CISO, maybe they have another name. I tell you what, why don't we start off with you, Dee, and we'll work our way around. Before we look at the leader of tomorrow, who are they today?
That's a really good question. I think depending on who you ask that question to and the industry and the sectors that you're looking at, they will be different skills, different blends of types of leaders, depending on what that kind of industry or organization requires. So I feel it's quite a varied response depending on where you're actually basing that question. It's somebody I feel that needs to be able to articulate and translate into business terms what the information security cyber risk is, and be able to take an audience, whether it be the organization, the board, the investors, whoever it is, on a journey of understanding that organizational risk, that particular organization's challenges, and what we then need to do to overcome them. But having that ability to then deliver upon what you are actually translating and saying. So from my perspective, it's kind of a shift of where you could sit in a technology company, that person might be very technical, whereas you might be sitting in a company that isn't technology services, but is about selling a product, and that would have to be a different conversation. So I think it depends, and you'd see a different blend of skills depending on which industry sector you're in.
And that is very fair, but I hope you know that's a conference organizer's worst nightmare. It depends.
It depends.
I want sound bites. No, I appreciate it. And you paint a very important picture, because that blend between business acumen, technical acumen, it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah. I think that's the key point there. If I were to say what should the leader or the accountable person be accountable for, is being able to translate into that business model what it is that we need to consider from a risk perspective.
So from a risk perspective, absolutely. But Vitor Jesus, you're an academic, but you're also someone with a technical background. Is there a danger that we go too far towards the communication side with this leader of the future? Or is that not at risk? Because we've heard of interesting CISOs with interesting backgrounds that may or may not fit our imagination. Are we neglecting technical skills building this leader?
Right. Jesus, my last name.
Oh, right.
I would say the following. I think cybersecurity now is very specialized, or it's going on to the specialization road, which makes sense, of course. It's a big world out there. And again, someone doing threat intelligence, for example, is definitely not doing data protection from the compliance side. And it's all part of the same. So I think it makes a lot of sense to ask that question when it becomes too much managing the consequences and the top layers of security and neglecting the hardcore, which is stopping breaches in some way or the other. However, cybersecurity is a business function. it meets business goals, which means, and I'm going to be very, very cynical when I say, I soon learned that cybersecurity does not exist to stop breaches. It exists to manage risk. Breaches will happen. There's again two types of businesses: those who have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached. So managing this is really the function. It's a function of the business. Again, just like environment, for example. We all have high expectations. We all try to do our best, but things will happen, and it's all a balancing act. So yes, the technical capability needs to be there. Cybersecurity is a technical problem, but the business function, the goal, the objectives perhaps need to drive, and also we've got finite resources to do this, and like security is expensive.
Expensive, and as you say, those who have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached or have yet to be breached. And so that brings us maybe to an education piece, because Ellie, I wonder if this top post holder with their finite resources, with maybe there are some enterprise customers with infinite resources, maybe they're there, but it's not common. Are they going to have to take their organization along on the ride? If so, does that make them chief engagement officer, chief educator? What does he make them?
I mean, I actually agree with everything that everybody's said so far, which is probably annoying for you as well. But the thing is that everything that happens within security, as Victor says, has to be driven by business objectives. So the objective is risk reduction. So therefore, the activities that we carry out should be to reduce risk. Part of that is education, yes. But if you look at the rest of how business operates, the more senior you become, the less technical generally that happens, that you happen to be. And this is not because of any dilution of your previous skills. It just means that you've had to learn new ones in order to meet the objective of the business and the part that your team is in charge of doing. So everything about technical, yes, you may be less technical because you're not on the tools every day in the way that you may have been earlier in your career, right? So that doesn't mean to say that we don't need to keep building technical skills, right? We do. It's a given in security that you're going to have technical skills. The communication piece is massively important because you've got a two-way communication to manage. You've got a communication to the board to ensure that the resources are in place for the security team to do the work that meets the objectives. And you've got the communication back from the business and from security to be able to say, this is what we need. These are the challenges that we're facing now. We need to hit these objectives, and security may be, you know, blocking those in some way if that two-way communication isn't in place. So what are they going to be? Yeah, an enabler is a great way of describing it. An enabler, a communicator. But I also feel that there is an element of having kept security as a separate entity that acts upon the organization far too much, which means that it's kind of grown up like a weed alongside all of the other business functions. And we need things that draw people together, particularly when it comes to leadership. Leadership is you know, a very complex beast. Yeah. And if the key elements of leadership are about removing the blockages to enable the potential to be met. Yeah. And that applies to people just as much as it does to functions. Yeah. So
I'd like to just add to that, because I think, Ellie, we all had a discussion outside of the room before we came in, and actually you touched on a really brilliant point around, well, what about physical security? What about organizations that have paper records? Yes. Information security, cyber security, technology security, they're all facets of protecting an organization. And actually, as a leader, you need to understand where your risk is, and it might not always be the technology, especially if we've talked about
if you've separated it out, you've created more risk, haven't you?
Exactly that. Yeah. So that was a really good point that I think we need to, you know, explore. Yeah. Is it just a technology risk? No. Security, we need to take into consideration all the different angles and facets of it. So is your leader able to articulate what the risk is for the business is the key thing, because it might not always be technical.
Mhm.
It might be something else.
It may well be something else.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you are drawing those things closer together, then actually what we're talking about is a risk register for a business, not a risk register and a security risk register. We're talking about risk.
Yeah.
So that means that everybody in the board is having regular conversations about risk, all of their risk.
Yeah.
And if I may add two very brief points, just about the conversation we had outside. One is the vast majority, and you can quote me on this, the vast majority of breaches we know about, they seem, Captain Hindsight, preventable, absolutely preventable. Again, security is, and that's the second point. It's technology, it's people, and it's the process. It's how things run.
Mhm.
Technology is technical, of course, but process and people, not really. So policies and so on. And it's an interesting aspect to link back to managed security services. Whereas the technical part is easy. We know where the hooks are. It's the MDRs, it's the laptops, it's the phones, it's the servers, it's the cloud. But when it comes to monitor people, sounds horrible, by the way. When it comes to monitor people and monitor processes, supply chains, for example, it's becoming a big thing. So you cannot compromise the big company. Right, let's go on the small company and somehow make it go into the big one. How do you monitor this? How to manage? How do you even risk assess?
And managing those onward relationships as well. So, you know, a third party risk, but also nth degree sharing. A lot of people don't even include that in their service level agreements. So they're sharing, you know, sometimes some quite sensitive information, but have no governance over what those third parties are doing with that information asset once it's let. So it's beyond arm's reach. It is completely, could be anywhere.
I'm actually running a research project on measuring third-party risk, which is absolutely hopeless. You cannot do any, because you cannot really audit a third party, no matter how friendly they are. Also, you're not really going there. So we've got contracts. That's all we've got, and questionnaires. So that's all we've got.
Which brings us to the interesting angle as to why are we talking top Postholder in an ostensibly MSS MSSP panel, because we're looking at supply chain vulnerability. In the States, they're still talking about their CMMC for defense contractors and government contractors. And one of the big things is, yes, it applies to third party, fourth party. How are you going to find it? Unless it's, you know, absolutely in some sort of defense contracts, which most people are not. In the audience, Tom says, aren't CISOs with no technical background at all a myth? In relation to those comments earlier, and also Ian says, how has it taken this long to bring the MSS forum to the West Midlands? Thank you, thank you, and also morning, Clement. So Dee, I guess on the point of technical background versus this SLA business background, how are we to reconcile the career path of somebody who may have been a full stack developer, maybe not, I don't know. They've been coding since they were 2, and now we're telling them that they have to learn legalese, they have to manage contracts, maybe their neck is on the line. How do we reconcile these, and third-party risk management? How do we reconcile that skill set?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think you need to be really clear on what your top post holders' accountabilities, roles and responsibilities are, and you should be making informed decisions on the skill sets of the individuals actually being interviewed or asked to take that post, and be very honest with what the business requires versus who is actually being asked to step up or step in, however it is. From a technical standpoint, my personal journey has been one which has been business and technical focused. So I've had the blend of both. And for me, it gives me a level of deeper understanding when it comes to technical decision making, and being able to then articulate that back through to where, you know, at the end of the day, you are, as an accountable post holder in that area, making decisions on the capabilities you're bringing in, on how you are actually maturing the capabilities that are already there. And you have to look at yourself and think, am I actually qualified to sit here and understand this? If I'm not, do I have the right people around me to support me making that decision? Because ultimately, I might have a great technical aptitude, but maybe I need some business guidance. So do I have somebody with a broad, strong business leadership mindset in my team? Because you don't have to be everything. You have to know where your development points are and be able to surround yourself with the people that have those strengths to enable you to be the leader, the leadership team as a collective. It's not always, you might have the top postholder name or role, but it takes a team to enable things to happen. So it's being self-aware, it's understanding what you are, what your key strengths are, and what you play to, and are you bringing the right people into the room to have discussions in the other areas. That's why we have teams, we aren't one individual. And I think that's the key of leadership, is understanding what your strengths are. Have you got the team? Have you got the strength in your team? Are you playing it to the best of its abilities? So as much as you might put somebody in it, so if we go back to a point around, do we, we have somebody deeply technical that's been coding since day one that now has all of these responsibilities and accountabilities. Well, who's put them there? And is that person supported to be able to deliver that? And somebody else needs to be able to take accountability for that. Say, have I done the right thing here? Am I supporting this individual? Have I given them all of the training? Am I giving them the coaching, the mentorship? Am I helping them to build rounder, bigger, stronger thinking? Who is making those decisions? Because we didn't employ ourselves. You've got to look at the people that are bringing you in and say, if you want me to be this, here's my strengths and this is what I need to build on. Do I have the support of people to make that happen?
So are we confusing therefore accountability with skill set and saying that they're the same thing when they actually aren't?
And I guess it also depends again, are we talking enterprise level with huge budgets and the office of the CISO? Wouldn't that be nice? Everyone had an office of the CISO. Or are we talking SMB, SME? Depends, you're better.
I think to your point on that, how an organization places this role and where it is enabled to engage and how it's enabled to engage says a lot about the maturity of the business in understanding the risk and what this role is actually there to do. Because actually that in itself is an interesting journey, and very many organizations have different positionings for this role. And looking at that will also tell you what this role is there to do, and B, how mature is the business in understanding in understanding the whole piece as a whole.
Okay, so if we say that we shouldn't just put someone in the role and go, right, you're now chief bottle washer, you're chief legal advisor, you're the legal, you're everything, because obviously someone has done that. Is there not a third way, Victor? I'd be interested in the education of tomorrow's professional. Should they look to academia? How could even a syllabus be sculpted to create this leader?
Precisely. In the last 5 years, I would say there's been a bit of a proliferation of cybersecurity degrees. And I've got thoughts I perhaps should not share, but even when designing, I was behind one of those, so right from the beginning, outlined the modules and so on. And even there, we have to quickly realize that cybersecurity is very specialized. Even 3 years, which is 10, 20 modules, 30 modules, something like that. Even with 30 modules, you cannot grasp the whole brief. I mean, you cannot offer the whole breadth of skills that are needed for things from data protection, which is very much towards compliance, certification, and so on, all the way to forensics. It's completely different. It's a different person. Do not put the same person doing this. You'll get wrong results, which means, or which suggests that a cybersecurity function, department, capability needs at least 5 people, kind of thing, which is completely impractical, really. A big company, Bank of America, has a department of 200 people. They've got the money and they've got the incentives for that, but they need to do that. A small company, the UK PLC, there's no way. Managed security services, for example, they offload the monitoring, the detection, etc. That's absolutely great, but still, it is challenging to understand how with 1 to 3 people, 80% of businesses in the UK, they've got 1 to 3 people in security. And I suspect they're actually IT and not quite security. So how do you actually square the circle with this? I'm probably not answering the question,
Yeah.
but it is a bit, it depends kind of,
Mm.
indeed, it's complicated, but above all, there's different skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no one single leading a team. Okay, it doesn't really matter in the end if it's more technical or more. It's more the leadership, the getting the machine, the orchestration right. But it all comes down to what the people are actually doing and their skills. And again, nobody doing digital forensics will really know how to implement ISO 27001 kind of thing, because it's not really the keep clarity of functions and
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And to your point, your question is around, is there a course that people can do and then become a leader, right? Well, if I could do a CEO course and go and grab that top whole post, do it tomorrow, I wouldn't be a CISO. You know, there's certain journeys you have to go through in your professional life and life cycle to gain not just your academia, because that's really important, but also your experience of doing different roles in this arena to say, okay, could I go and do that role? Could I go and be the CEO of this company right now? I know one bit of this much. That CEO looks across everything and knows everything. Could I go and do that right now? No, but what if that's really your trajectory? What do you need to go and do to get on that pathway? Are we clear about that in cybersecurity? Here's your pathway, but then what C title has any clear pathway into that role? Because we're looking at cyber, let's look at it holistically in that context. If you think about your CTOs and your, every C-level exec, they didn't just come out of uni and jump into that role. They have. In fact, people have got CEOs of companies before, they've even done a degree. We've got people that are just making all the companies at young ages and becoming CEOs and doing really well. They've got a leadership mindset and a skill set. So it's all playing into your own personal skill set. Do you have a leadership mindset? Is that part of who you are? That might link in with what you're doing in an academic perspective and in your experience. It's understanding that.
A very quick thing. Nobody with more than 5 years of experience have formal training in cybersecurity beyond certifications, which not always that helpful, I should say, but the market is indeed oriented towards certifications. And to answer your question, we're right. Is it better academic, formal universities, education or certifications? And I would say it's certifications these days. The market very much looks into certifications these days. But nobody having with more than 5 years of experience had no training in cybersecurity. We all started by accident. We all caught up in some way, and suddenly we got established as security professionals. But really,
a lot of hobbies, practitioners.
We're hackers in the sense of self-taught kind of thing.
So we're still addressing technical skills here, and the conversation that we were having outside when we were talking about the broad church that is information security. You look at some smaller businesses, you look at a lot of legal practices, for instance. They tend to be a lot of smaller legal practices, and they operate on paper records. Local authorities will operate using paper records as well as technological platforms and tools. There is still a big area in securing our businesses and organizations that is not going to be solved by a cybersecurity degree, however wonderful it is. There is a much bigger risk picture that needs to be addressed, and the role of the CISO, and I think the role of potentially the chief risk officer is pivotal in that, because it has to look at all of the information risk. We can't continue to focus on technology because it's only part of the picture, and we're leaving ourselves exposed in a great many ways. If you look at the data that comes out of the Information Commissioner's Office, we can see that not only does it tend to be human error that either causes or enables a breach to happen, but it's also physical things like leaving physical printed documentation in pubs, in taxis, etc. There's a much bigger picture than cyber.
Which makes the job of the top post holder probably more complex, possibly less desirable. I'm just referring, Tom, it says, how can we then attract people to the role if being a CISO gets a target on your back? Which I think is a popular press thing at the moment, but maybe I could blend that and ask Dee. So in the context of working with third parties, certainly decisions you make will have ramifications that could do that, but what would you like to see them look like if they're going to be handling many more SLAs? Maybe chief sense checker, maybe chief yes, but.
Yeah. I think it's a good question. The reason why I'm thinking about it is because it's how are you partnering up with your legal function, with your procurement function, and with your assurance functions to ensure that you are actually holding everybody accountable for what needs to happen. So you might be the chief information security officer, but it's not on your back to ensure that it's on your back to ensure there's a proper schedule in place, and that makes sense with whatever MSP you're working with. The contents of that schedule meet your needs and requirements, but it is also upon your procurement function and your legal function to ensure that's embedded, negotiated, included, and then your assurance functions to support you in making sure that's then adhered to. It's not all about you. So how are you as a leader then articulating and holding everybody accountable? Because cybersecurity, information security, any security, data privacy is everybody's problem, not just the CISO's problem. They are simply there to support the organization in understanding the risk and coming up with the solutions and supporting the driving of the strategy and the delivery of it all. But it doesn't mean that they are accountable and responsible for everything that happens. Everybody in the organization is. Absolutely. And that's the key message. And that you drive through risk. Right. I actually own minimal risk. You guys own all the risk. What are you going to do about this? I can help you to support you in that conversation. If it comes down to a supplier, do I really own the risk? Or is it the service that we are procuring for this area that owns that risk? And we are simply here to support you in minimizing it. So actually you need to include this schedule. You need to worry about this. How are we articulating that risk back and ensuring that our business understand it's not me. It's not on my back, actually, it's on yours. So would you like me to support you in making that less of a risk? Or would you like me to not get involved and you continue with the risk unknown? So it's actually, how do you articulate to your business what risk you carry versus what risk everybody else carries? And it's everybody's problem, not just yours.
So back to communication again. But it does make me wonder about the level of education within businesses that allow individuals within the organisation to take responsibility for their contribution to the resilience, the security resilience of the organisation. Because until we start to address that issue as well, then we can't allow our security experts, our risk experts in our businesses to go and be the security and risk partners that we need them to be. So they're horizon scanning and doing the stuff that they really need to be doing, instead of being bogged down in, in the weeds all the time, managing things that really should be, we should be developed enough now to handle some of those things ourselves within our organizations. So I think that we also need to look at the education of our people as well as the education of our leaders, to enable them to lead, to enable them to partner, to enable them to communicate with those other areas where they really need to. Because that's where the resilience is going to come. Absolutely.
Across the board.
And then there's the other thing, which I feel security is becoming also a competitive advantage, which means, right, it's now a strategy. It's not just, right, let's be compliant, let's make sure we make our vendors and customers happy because they can trust, etc. But it may be becoming a competitive advantage. Data protection is, again, a very good example. We really care about your privacy, your data, your personal data, for example, and beyond the taglines, because they all care. Well, we really do, because we do this and that nice clean previously noticed, etc., etc. So security is becoming I think it's becoming a competitive advantage, and there's a way to do that. And that's, I think, the leader of the future needs definitely to understand this aspect, this
100%.
strategic aspect. And so, right, we're not just being called when things go wrong. No, really, we actually are active. We contribute to the business. We actually bring in revenue indirectly, I suppose, but we do. And this is important.
Which brings them to a trusted advisor, which brings the question, Dee, to your point, maybe they're an advisor, maybe they don't have to own all the risk, otherwise they can't give so much advice. That maybe their advice, if they owned all the risk, would be no. You'd definitely be the Department of No.
Well, we've seen that, haven't we, for many years?
Yeah.
Security says no. And, I think a lot of hard work has gone into fighting against that and trying to promote security as a business enabler, which is then we're back to where we started, which was, what are the business objectives? How do we achieve them securely?
Yeah.
So I'm conscious of time. Why don't we just do around the room and ask a nice, happy question, right? What do you think we could hope to achieve with an event such as this in the West Midlands? Gives us an opportunity to highlight that the West Midlands is a great place and gives us a flavour of where we might go today. Victor, your thoughts, where can we go and why is this a nice place to do the event?
It is a very nice place, I should say. It's a very vibrant area, the West Midlands in general. Cybersecurity skills, by the way, is a real gap. There's not enough people to take on security roles. There's lots of industry. Birmingham is sits a bit in the shadows. It's not very common to hear in the news and so on, but there's lots going on. There's very high tech going on. There's lots of innovation going on here. There's brilliant universities here. So I think it's perhaps time to bring it from the shadows because it deserves, really. It's just not London, which
Love it. Dee?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we are a mobile and connected industry that should be location agnostic. Talent is everywhere. Talent is all over the world. Our organizations are connected all over the world, and there is absolutely talent no matter what part of the UK you go to. It's having these type of events in locations that are not necessarily always the center of attention gives people in these locations, talent in these locations and places around the UK, the ability to think, I could be that, I could do that. It's going to attract that mentality of this isn't too far away from me. You've got students out here, very talented, successful, the new leaders, the next leaders, people coming in and being the next, whatever it is. It's accessible. It's making that accessible across the UK for everybody and saying, look, it doesn't matter where you're located. We take on talent from all over the UK, all over the world. Come and join in the journey. Come and get involved. This is not just a thing that's really far away that you can't access. It's simple. It's here. You're the talent. Come and join us. Does that make sense?
Like it.
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
And Ellie?
I think we need to blow our own trumpet a little bit more, and not to each other. I think we need to blow it to business and say, do you know how amazing security is? Do you know what we do? I think we need to build relationships with business and maybe start, not remove the security word, but rethink how we can position ourselves to business. The other thing I think we need to do is to look at our talent pipeline. Talent pipeline, for me, I have gone into some colleges, a couple of universities, and a school on one memorable occasion to talk about a future in security, to talk about how broad security is, to talk about all the different things that you might be good at that could be really useful in reducing risk and building resilience. And I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to talk ourselves up a bit more, and definitely in Birmingham, we've got a similar, as Victor was saying, we've got a kind of reluctance to come forward. Birmingham has a reluctance to come forward and blow its own trumpet. Security is very similar. So in that way, we're a good fit, but I think it's something that we need to overcome.
Like it. Well, thank you ever so much for such a nice opening panel. I think we've set the scene for the day. Let's give Victor, Dee, and Ellie a big virtual round of applause. Ian's clapping, Tom Brooks, great discussion. I look forward to seeing you in the audience.
Thank you very much.
Excellent,
Thank
thank you.